Welcome to my channel, Ken here. Today let's take a look at the Ferrum OOR Headphone Preamplifier. Let's go! The Ferrum OOR is a high-end headphone amplifier and line preamplifier. The Ferrum OOR is perfectly suited for the studio. However, I wish it had a couple of features. We'll talk about that later. The sound quality of the Ferrum OOR is fantastic, and I'll go into detail about that in a little bit, but let's take a look at what this thing is first. This is a half-rack headphone amplifier. It has a 4-pin output and a 1/4-inch output on the front panel. It also has the obligatory volume control, and it has an input switch. The switch will switch between either XLR input and RCA, and then the middle position is mute. On the other side, it has an output switch that will match the gain setting for the headphones, meaning that if you have very efficient headphones, let's say earbuds or the Austrian Audio, the Composer or something like that, it's probably better that you scale down the output so the volume control will sit in a more comfortable zone, so it's not sitting around 8 o'clock all the way down here, and you can kind of turn it up to 11, 12. And I think this has to do, and I'm not sure about this, but I think it has to do with getting the potentiometer of the volume to sit in a better zone than all the way down or all cranked all the way up all the time. So what you have here is 1/4-inch output. You have either -10, 0 dB, or +10 dBs. When it's on the 4-pin, you have, let's see here, -4 dBs, +4 dBs, or +16 dBs. You have a couple of interesting functions, but let's talk about the basic ones first. It has a pair of XLR inputs and outputs and a pair of RCA inputs and outputs. So it can function as a preamp. It also has this brightness dial that you can dial from low light to high light on the front panel, so depending on the ambient light and what you want. And also you can match the light settings, so if you have other Ferrum products like the Wanderlau or the Hipsos. Then it has the basic wall wart type 24-volt power supply, and then it has a special power supply input to hook up to the Hipsos, and I will talk about this later. It also has a bypass switch, so it'll just run at full volume the whole time, and that can be useful if you have the volume control. Let's say you're controlling it from your DAW master output, or you're controlling it from the computer volume or something like that. Then you want it as full output. You got to be careful though, because if you have headphones plugged in and you switch and it's full blast, you can blow your headphones, or your speakers if you have speakers hooked up to it. So that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward and simple, and it's very well made. The only thing I have to say here is that I feel like the front knob volume is a little bit crooked. It's not completely straight. Even though the distributor sent this device to me, all the opinions and thoughts are mine and mine alone. A couple of specs here that are really important, I think anyway. It is fully balanced throughout, and it shows. It's very quiet, and I'll talk about a couple of things that are beneficial here for that. It has 8 watts at 60 ohms, so it feels like this thing doubles very far down as you're having the ohms. So let's say 30 ohms, it would be 16 watts, and 15 ohms, it would be 32 watts, and so forth and so on. And I have to say that this thing is super powerful. There's nothing that I had here that it couldn't drive to insanely loud volume. As a matter of fact, be a little careful and get familiar with the power of this beast, because it definitely will play very loud and maybe damage your headphones and especially your ears, so be careful. I tried this with a bunch of headphones. The very inefficient Head 2 GTs and the Head 2s, and it had absolutely no trouble playing it loud. the Composer by Austrian Audio, Odyssey LCD 5, the Neumann NDH30, Odyssey LCD X's, Biodynamic 770s, Fostex T50 Mark IVs, and focal lenses. Now about that 4-pin versus the 1/4 inch. The 4-pin has 4 times the output, and I've never seen this before, but it's markedly different. And when you have that 4-pin, you can definitely tell that there's something going on under the hood here. And I have to say this, it sounds different. This is the first time I've ever heard such a big difference. And with this particular unit, the OOR, you have to play your headphones on that 4-pin. All my listening was done with the 4-pin, and all my comments are done with that 4-pin in mind, because I only tried it with the 1/8-inch output with headphones that I didn't have a 4-pin connector for that headphone. But most of the time I listen to it with a 4-pin connector. So how does this thing sound? Well, first and foremost, the XLR or the 4-pin output is a necessity here. It sounds way better. Now, first I tried it with its power supply that it comes with, and then I tried it with the upgraded Hipsos, and most of my listening was done with the Hipsos attached to it. Well, first and foremost, this thing is very, very powerful. No problems driving anything loud. Second of all, it is very fast and rhythmic. It has a very, very nice wide sound, and the mids and the treble is very, very detailed, but a little bit forward to me. The bass is very, very tight, fast, and articulate. It could use a little bit of bloom and fullness. You can match headphones with it or EQ that bass up slightly if you feel like it, but I like it. It's very detailed, and it's very articulate. The lower mids have the same issue. Could use a little bit of warmth, but it is very, very detailed. And the same thing with the upper extended treble. It is very open and very full sounding on the very top end. So air and reverb. To me, in a lot of ways, it has the best that solid state has to offer. All these things that I just described as far as the sound quality of it is concerned, it's all the best qualities that solid state has. This is a very analytical tool too, and that's why I would recommend it for studio, because it just shows you everything upstream. Any changes, cabling, DAC, everything. However, I have to say that it worked really well with the Wanderer that I have here also. They seem to be a very synergistic match. And the way I ran this on my DAW was that I had an AES output from my studio audio interface running into the Wanderer that did the conversion, and then the OOR did all the power and volume control and so forth and so on. With this particular headphone amp, I prefer it with planners. They seem to have complete control over the planner headphones, and since planners have a really good bass to begin with, that rhythmic drive was very evident here. So I really like them with the LCD 5s and the LCD X's and even the Fostex. A little bit critical about how you hook them up, and hook them up with balanced 3-pin XLRs for left and right, and you will be rewarded, especially if you use the 4-pin output. So use balance throughout the whole chain if you can, because it definitely is worthwhile. This is the biggest difference I've heard between 4-pin and 1/4 inch so far. Once I hooked up that Hipsos power supply, it's a must-have, by the way. I'll say that right away, because you get more separation between the instruments, and here's where the superpower lies with this combination: fully balanced and the Hipsus with the OOR is you get this incredible separation between instruments and incredible detail retrieval. It also tightens up that bass when you hook up the Hipsos. It is also more relaxed. It sounds just more at ease. Faster transients and better detail. So we're talking about the 10% to 20% range. And it's kind of nice that you can upgrade it as you go along. You can get the OOR first and then get the Hipsus to upgrade it later on. This thing must be running up very high into Class A because it gets pretty warm. I wouldn't say it gets hot, but it gets pretty warm and it needs ventilation for sure. I am wondering is why this is not rack mountable for a studio. Since it's a half rack, why can't you have the two units right next to each other in a rack? Of course, with ventilation. From a production standpoint, you get more insight into mixes. All the decisions you make in the mix are very well portrayed here, and not only that, but it's very clear. So any kind of EQ moves you make or compression, fader moves or whatever, very clearly defined here. Now, do I have anything criticism of this unit? Well, I do have a few. It is very much on the analytic side, so some people might find that there is a little bit of a listening fatigue because it's hyper-analytical, and it's also very solid state sounding, if you want to call it that, meaning that it doesn't have that bloom in the bottom end, which is a pleasant sound. I wish it had a switch on there where you could switch between the front panel headphone outputs and the back panel preamp. You don't have that here. The headphones will still be playing when you're playing it as a preamp through speakers. That's a problem in the studio, and maybe they'll have an upgrade later on for that, but it would be nice if you could switch off the headphones and then listen to speakers and then back to headphones, back and forth. And the other thing is, they should make a package deal with this Hipsos, because to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense not to get it with the Hipsos, although gets pretty pricey. But it's nice that you can upgrade as you go. Do I recommend this for studio? I do. If you want highly analytical sound, which we like in the studio, and you want something that can drive any headphones, and you can adapt to that balanced front output, get this one. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take care.